Today, we are going to look at a case study which will demonstrate how we often help individuals choose the right policy. This is a great case study because we've got an individual who has some experience with whole life insurance. He's got policies with 3 different companies, and right now he's considering a fairly large policy. We're going to go through the exact numbers and you'll see the different scenarios that he's considering. However, in looking at his situation, specifically the policy and what he wanted to do, I looked at everything, assessed at the numbers, and it was really a situation where I said, okay, you could do this. And if you go with the high-end option and fund it exactly as planned for the next 20 years, because that's how long you want us to pay into it, this can work quite nicely. However, if I'm you, I would want to see a few alternatives here, because I don't know that I would go down the path that you're considering, meaning we can make it better, noticeably better for that matter. So what we've got to set the stage, we've got an individual, early 40s. He is 43 years old. He is a physician. He also invests in real estate, and his annual income is about $9.25. So approximately $925,000. It's slightly higher than that. And he's got policies already with Mass Mutual, Guardian, and Northwestern Mutual. These are all whole life insurance policies, and he's got a healthy amount of cash value in place. All of those policies are being kept. So what he is interested in with respect to a new policy is one of these 3 funding scenarios. He wants to fund a policy for 20 years. That'll take him up until age 63, so very, very close to retirement. And the amount he is considering is $120 per year, $240,000 per year, or he even said, you know what, I might even go up to $360 per year. He is in a position where he can easily handle this based on his income, even with the other policies. And he is experienced with whole life insurance. He knows how to use the policy, understands loans and such. But with this particular design and the company he selected, there are a couple of things that I thought were important to go through. So regarding the large policy, the $360 per year for 20 years, because this would probably satisfy the need or eliminate the need to take out more additional policies in the future. If he says, okay, let me just get a big one right now where I can consistently fund this and add lump sums in the future and not have to take out new policies in the future, this option will satisfy that. So my question is this: for the large policy, how realistic is it for you to be able to pay in $360,000 per year for 20 years? Or get that total dollar amount in, that $7.2 million over 20 years, do you feel you can get $7 million into the policy? The answer could be yes, but we've got other policies. Some of his income comes from real estate investments, specifically syndication deals, which he receives lump sums. Sometimes they're delayed and such. But what is your confidence level here, or how realistic is it? Could be very realistic, but I definitely want to discuss that before saying, yeah, let's just take the bigger option out. Because if we bite off more than we can chew, it can hurt the performance of the policy, not just a little bit, but a lot, and create a situation where we look back and said, I should have went with a smaller one from the get-go. So the company he is interested in, he's actually approved with them at the top health rating, is Guardian. He's interested in them, one, because he's got experience with them already. Mass, Guardian, Northwestern, he's got policies with. They're a major mutual, the PUA flexibility. That's really the advantage here. So if he wants to pay in a large dollar amount, say he picks the $120,000 per year, what he can do is commit to approximately $12,000 per year. He could even pay $1,000 per month. And then at his leisure, he can add additional funds into PUAs up to $108 per year. And he doesn't have to do that either, meaning the funding can vary. Point, he's committed to a small amount and can add more funds at leisure. So before we get into the alternatives, he requested this. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we show him this. I'm a big believer, if someone wants to see a certain product or strategy, show them that. Don't try and talk your way out of it and say, well, I wouldn't recommend that, and here's a million reasons why. No. What do you notice on the left? $120K per year for 20 years. Option to the right of that in the center, $240 per year for 20 years. And then $360 per year for 20 years. Here we've got the different funding illustrations. We'll go through a couple of the actual detailed illustrations from the insurance company as well, but this is just the simplified overview. So here we go, 120 per year for 20 years. First year, if he pays in 120, cash value, just about $96,000. Looking at the break-even point, you're between years 5 and 6. And you will see consistency across the board because the designs are identical. We just have 120, then that times 2, and then that times 3. And again, we're going to go through the specific design here in a second. But when I say consistency, look at your break-even point between 5 and 6 with all 3. So these designs work, and I'll say this. If he goes with any of these, and he is extremely confident that he can continue to fund this dollar amount year in and year out, specifically with Guardian in his case, this will work. It is not a bad option at all. However, going with a design like this, we've got a very large term rider attached to the policy. So if I have several years where I fund lower amounts, or I have to stop the funding early, or something else happens where I'm not funding it at the planned amount, that term cost can be more expensive than what I would be comfortable with. So I would want to look at some alternate designs here, particularly with the range he's looking at. So firstly, a technical detail here. Guardian specifically, in my opinion, they are ideal for max funding if my plan is to max fund it for 10 years or less. Now, what I mean when I say max fund it is if I'm going to 10x the base premium. So if I've got a base premium of $12,000, I'm going to 10x that year in and year out for 10 years. Specifically, the term rider will burn out at that point in time. And after that, I either stop or continue to pay the base premium and maybe a small amount in PUAs. That's a great way to keep the term rider lower, keeping the term costs lower, and really maximize the cash value performance of the policy. Maximizing cash value is my goal. If I want to go longer than that, 20 years, as he wants to do, and he wants Guardian, that will require a larger term rider. And now there's another variable I've got to work with here and just be aware of. Awareness is the key word in this situation. So when I look at Guardian, and I look at their PUA limits here, on the left, this is without a term rider. So when I say without a term rider, we're going to look at with and without. This OYT stands for 1 year term rider. So again, this is without on the left. The first year, whatever your base premium is, Guardian will allow a policyholder to pay up to 50x that base premium in PUAs. Huge lump sum. Aside from the first year, here's how their PUA limits work. Years 2 through 10, whatever your base premium is, you can add an additional 3x in PUAs. So if you had a base premium of $12,000, that means they would accept an additional $36,000 per year without medical underwriting. You could just add it to the policy at leisure. From the 11th year onward, they will accept 1x the base premium each year without medical underwriting. Anything higher is subject to what they refer to as evidence of insurability, meaning you might have to go through a medical exam, they want to check your health. But again, this is without a term rider. We'll almost always recommend a term rider because it will allow you to maximize the cash value. So if you do attach a term rider, specifically this 1 year term rider with Guardian, the PUA limits are different. First year it's the same. You can still go up to 50x the base premium. But then all years, as long as that 1 year term rider is attached, we can illustrate a maximum of 10x the base premium in PUAs. Sometimes Guardian will allow policyholders to exceed that. However, we cannot illustrate anything higher than 10x that. Not when running new illustrations, that is. So, point to this, 20 years, that's a large term rider. Specifically a large 1 year term rider, it's going to come at a cost. So if this is me and I'm interested in these potential designs, I would look at very quickly an alternate. And I would ask myself the question, how realistic is the 360K for 20 years? Could it be a case where I said, hey, I'm going to get $360,000 in every year for 10 years. And then after that, it could be a reduced amount, or maybe it's an average of $200,000 per year, and there are several years that I'd like to be able to add $360,000 per year, but it's not going to be 20 consecutive years. I'm not going to get $7.2 million into the policy. And again, if I am, then I would go with that option. And this is exactly what we let him know as well. However, this was an option I definitely wanted to show him. So if he goes with a design that allows him to max fund it at $360,000 per year for 10 years, he can stop after 10 years, or if he's not getting that in, he can fund it a lower amount longer. So you can go with this design and fund $120K per year. It can be $240,000 per year. You can go up to $360,000 per year. He's only committed to about $36,000 per year. Remember, he can add more at leisure. It really has to do with this term rider. So let's illustrate this because I know this can be a complex topic. So here's the basic design we just looked at. So here's the big policy, the big one. And what do we got here as we look at this? Let me make this a click smaller. I want to go all the way down to year 20 here. So what do we see here? Top right, what do you notice? Premium is what? $42,000. That's your base premium. That buys you a whole life death benefit of just over $1.9 million. And then below that, you see this target additional benefit, which is your term insurance rider. There is a cost for that term insurance rider. Here it is initially, almost $7,700. Now that cost will go down over time. The illustrated funding is what? $360,000 per year. Is he committed to this every year? No. Ideally, what we would do in a situation like this is commit just to that minimum there. So it's about $50,000 in this example, and then add the rest at discretion. Now, here's the big thing to hit on, and this will illustrate the term rider, which you will see right here, face amount of 1 year term. When you add money to a whole life insurance policy, particularly the paid up additions rider, what happens is that goes into cash value of all adds. This represents PUA payments plus dividends applied to PUA payments, but it buys you more whole life death benefit. So total face amount of adds represents the additional whole life insurance that is purchased from paid up additions. This is you adding money to PUAs and also dividends purchasing PUAs, as dividends can be reinvested into your policy. So my point is this: the first year, if he dumps in $318,000 into PUAs, that buys him another $818,000 in whole life death benefit, which is added to this, his original whole life death benefit. And look at the term rider again. What was it on day 0? Up here, 17.16. What happens after you add the funds? In year 1, comes down to 16 million and change. So the whole life plus the term life will always equal the total death benefit, which in this case is $19.1 million. And what this design does is we added just enough term so he has the ability to pay in $360,000 per year for 20 years. That's also why that death benefit is so high. So if we lower the term rider and lower the death benefit, what happens is the term will burn out sooner. And then once that term is gone, remember the PUA limits we just looked at with Guardian? We can illustrate 10x the base premium as long as term is attached. Once it's gone, we're subject to the basic PUA limits, which does not work out. Not if I want to pay in $360,000 per year with a low base premium. So again, this works well if I am very, very confident that I can do this or get a total of $7.2 million into the policy. This does not work well if I feel that I'm going to get $360,000 in some years, but most years will be less than this. I would not go with this design then. I would reduce everything drastically. So let's take a look at this, but simplified. So back to the first sheet, simple side by side. Next, we've got the exact same thing. What's different though? We've got some additional reports. You've got your 1-year term rider and also your average internal rate of return. Average, not annual. If it was the annual IRR, you would see it higher. You'd see it positive with this example right around year 3 or 4. The annual IRR just isolates each year. Average, you'll notice we're in the red until we hit the break-even point, which is when our cash value exceeds our total payments. By year 6, you've paid in a total of 720 in this example. But far right, average internal rate of return, and there's the term rider timed for 20 years in this example. Now we can always chop that term rider off too if he decides he wants to fund shorter, but I don't want to start it too aggressive if he feels it's unrealistic after having a conversation. Look at this though. Look at your age 65 IRR. You're at 3.73%. Keep that in mind, 3.73 by age 65. Got it? Next tab, we're going to look at funding the policy for 10 years. All 3 of them again. And you'll notice differences, which I'll highlight. But to start with this, 4.09% on the internal rate of return. That's high. That's much higher than the last example we looked at, isn't it? Same product, same company, same health rating, less money going in. I only paid into it for 10 years. So why is the performance stronger? Lower expenses. So let's look at this. Let's go back to that illustration. Here's our 20-year example. Base premium is at $42,000. Now, what I want to hit on here too, normally that would be at least $36,000. It's a bit high here. The reason why, and again, this is when we're going with a large term rider on a policy, is base premium has a relationship to the whole life death benefit. The whole life death benefit cannot be less than 10% of the total death benefit. We're a tick above 10%. So in reality, if this was the design he wanted, we would reduce that whole life death benefit a little bit, and this would be $41,000 and change, maybe $41,500. We just rounded up in this example to a clean 42. But point is, total death benefit, 19.1. That whole life death benefit cannot be less than 10% of the total. If you're funding for a long period of time with a guardian policy, where we need this term rider attached, if we want to keep on piling money into PUAs, we're going to run into a situation like this where we're forced to set the base premium higher than what we would normally do. So, next example. Here we go. Screen size a little bit bigger here because we're only going for 10 years. What do you notice? How much different is this? Top right, what do you have? Base premium of $32,000 and change. PUA payment of exactly 10x that. We could set it lower because there's our whole life death benefit, $1.5 million. But if we're funding it for 10 years, we don't need a $19.1 million death benefit. Here's your term. We attached enough term for it to last for 10 years instead of 20, which allowed us to reduce the overall costs on the policy, lesser base premium and such. That's really what I wanted to hit on there. So, looks much, much better when we look at the cash value breaks even at clean year 5 instead of between years 5 and 6, and the internal rate of return is stronger. The cash value growth is more attractive in this option when we look at it from a rate perspective compared to the 360 for 20 years. On the flip side, I would say, yeah, but I can only get half the amount in, right? Which is a valid point. So here's what I would look at, and here's where it comes down to a discussion and really his preference more than anything else. The 360 for a full 20 years, is that realistic? Because he could do something like this. Here's 360 for 10 years, and then 65 thereafter. This illustrates the limits afterwards, and really what he can definitely do once the term rider burns out. 65 per year, that's the base, times 2, and then we just round it down. But what if we did something like this? Want to see something cool? I'm going to show you something else too, but Here's the exact same policy. This is the 10-year funding option, the 360 for 10 years. But what do we got here? Base premium, death benefit. How much are we funding? $240 per year. In this case for 15 years and then down to 65. This is one example to display if he funds not 360 every year, maybe it varies, some years he hits it, some years he pays in less, that term is going to expire at a slower pace. As long as the term is still attached, that gives him that permission slip to just pile funds into PUAs. So usually when someone wants to pile funds into PUAs for 10 years or less and wants that flexibility, Guardian's fantastic. Going longer, I'm going to have some different tips and recommendations here, to say the least. But let's look at this. So here's the 10-year funding for the three options, 120, 240, and 360. Minimum base premium, minimum term rider, everything is juiced for cash value performance. Looks good. Remember what we just looked at? Those alternatives for the 360 for 10 years. Stay with me. Here's what we just looked at on the left. 360 for 10 years. Committed to this, plus the term rider cost, so call it $36K a year. I'm funding a total of 360 a year. If I max fund it for 10 years, breaks even year 5, it looks good. Here it is. If I said, you know what, let me go with that option, but in reality, the most I can ever get it in is 240. Well, I underfunded it, but the break even is between years 5 and 6. Very similar to the other option, the 240 per year for 20 years. But then look at this. This one was fun to look at. So what if he starts lower, years 1 through 3, can get it at 120 per year, then has several years where he pays in 360, then 240, then down to the minimum over here. What do you notice? Carries a lower base premium, which is the nice thing there. But when he's paying less in, the term drops, but look at this, you're dropping by about 200K per year. Then all of a sudden you scale your payment up to 360 and that term shrinks faster. So it's really just a matter of seeing the different designs and again, what he's comfortable with from a total funding amount. A way you could almost back into this is if we said, hey, what's the total amount you find that you think is realistic to get in? 3.6, is it close to 4 million? Is it the $7 million amount we saw before? And that can be a tough question to answer too, but it's one of many questions we may just ask during the discussion. And we've got the 20-year funding as well, with a cool lump sum scenario on the left, if he's got a big pile of money in cash, using that 50x limit. But my point is this, looking at alternatives, or I should say recommending alternatives, when we are leaning toward a situation that I think might not be the best option, that is something that we do because it's important. The last thing we want is buyer's remorse. For example, I go with a 360 per year for 20 years and I end up paying in a maximum of 120 to 240 per year. That would be a case where if we could do it all over again, we would start with a lower dollar amount. However, if your max is somewhere between 120 and 240 per year, you can go with this option. Because if you paid, let's call it 180 per year into the policy, this option would allow you to pay 180 per year for 20 years and still scale up to 360 per year in some years. Very easy to follow. No, I know it's technical, but my point is this is definitely something that's good to consider. And if we're working with you, we are going to discuss this. It's rare because usually when someone wants to fund longer, it's common to see them gravitate toward perhaps Mass Mutual. But this is an individual who has experience with multiple life insurance companies, wants that flexibility, and he's got a good handle on everything. He knows what he's doing. He's experienced with whole life. And when I have conversations with him, he gets it. He knows exactly what he's doing with his strategies and such. In any event, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the like button, subscribe for more. Let us know if you have any questions at all, and we'll talk to you soon. Enjoy. Hey guys, Steve Parisi here. If you enjoyed the content you just saw, please subscribe, like, and hit the notification bell for future videos. If you'd like more information or to see some custom policies for yourself, feel free to call or email our offices at the contact information below.